Genetics COK by me, Jaleesa Livingstone. A Punnett square is a diagram used to find the chance of a trait in offspring based off the dominant and recessive traits of the parents. While a genotype is a set of genes in our DNA which is responsible for a particular trait. Now, a phenotype is a description of your actual physical characteristics. However, the phenotype of an organism depends on which genes are dominant and on the interaction between genes and environment. Now, an allele is different forms of the same gene. The gene for eye color has an allele for blue eye color and an allele for brown eye color. Now, alleles are dominant or recessive. They can be each. Now, homozygous dominant carries two copies of the same dominant allele. Now, it is a homozygous dominant because the Punnett square all contains capital letters. And capital letters all mean dominant genes. So therefore, this Punnett square is a homozygous dominant. Now, homozygous recessive deals with the same concept like a homozygous dominant, except the genes are different. Instead, these are recessive genes instead of dominant genes. With a Punnett square containing all recessive genes and not one dominant gene, that means that it is a homozygous recessive rather than a homozygous dominant or a heterozygous. Now, heterozygous means that an organism has two different alleles for a gene. For example, if a mother and father's genes consisted of B, which is a dominant trait, and a lowercase b for a recessive trait, that would be heterozygous because they are each different. Now, same with the eye diagram. For brown eyes, it is dominant, and for blue eyes, it is recessive. With the brown being dominant genes and the blue eyes being recessive genes, it is heterozygous. Adding on, a carrier is an individual who carries and is capable of passing on a genetic mutation associated with a disease or may not display disease symptoms. Now here's an example of a pedigree chart that shows the carrier for a gene called hemophilia. Now this certain gene is within the mother and she is the carrier for it. Now, even though the father does not have this type of gene, it is still likely to carry on throughout their children, which is shown below. Now, 2 out of 4 children are responsible for the hemophilia gene. Now, the daughter is a carrier for it, while the son completely has it. Now, the daughter is just a carrier for it because then the daughter has inherited a recessive allele for a genetic trait. Now, before you have been shown an example of a pedigree chart, but here is the full definition of it. Now, the purpose of a pedigree chart is to help scientists trace the passing on of traits. Now, each pedigree chart contains these same symbols. For example, these rectangles here are for males and the circles here are for females. Now, these symbols are the same throughout every single pedigree chart. Now you can see that these circles contain different colors. These females mean that they are carriers. Or it can mean that they both contain a dominant gene, but however, a recessive gene, which is also shown in this little key. Now, of course, each pedigree chart does not contain the exact same of information. For example, this pedigree chart contains more generations than this one and this one. Punnett squares flowers. Now, for the flowers, the father's genes are dominant and they have capital letters. Now, the mother's genes are also dominant and they are capital letters. Now, the purple means dominant and the white means recessive. Now, because the father and mother all have dominant genes, that means their children are all going to have dominant genes. The parents are purple because they are dominant. The children are purple also because they are carrying dominant genes from the parents and no recessive. The flower family consists of only dominant genes and no recessive genes. Therefore, the children contain dominant genes. Here is a Punnett square of seeds. Now, the father genes are both recessive and the mother genes are both recessive. So that means their children are all going to have recessive genes. The color of the parents are green because they carry all recessive genes. The children are also green because they carry recessive genes from their parents. Complete the pedigree chart. Brown eyes are a dominant eye color allele, and blue eyes are recessive. A brown-eyed woman whose father had blue eyes and whose mother had brown eyes marries a brown-eyed man whose parents are also brown-eyed. They have a son who is blue-eyed. Please draw a pedigree showing all four grandparents, the two parents, and the son. Indicate which individuals you are certain of the genotype and where there are more than one possibilities. Now, because the blue eyes are recessive, they contain of lowercase letters, which means recessive genes. And the brown contains of capital letters because the capital letters mean dominant genes.